Hey, hi there, everyone. So we are just warming up, waiting for our host and guest here. I see there are some faces here. I think my Levy viewers counter is broken. Gonna add Dave to the stream now. Hey man, how you doing?
Hey man, how are you doing? Let me do the setup.
Okay, so let me just remove you here. Dave is here. Hello, Eduardo. Say hello if you want Dave and Gabriel to come to Brazil. We are very excited to finally start this this show. Uh, awesome, a lot of familiar faces here in the chat. Yes, we are live, but okay, just answering the private chat. Okay, we have 2 minutes going. Can I add you to the stream, Dave? Okay. Yes. Okay, so say hello
Hey
to Dave.
guys, hello.
So we are 2 minutes to go. So how is the weather there? some chit talking
Oh
before.
yeah, definitely. What is good? Yeah, what is good? Yeah, what time is in Brazil now?
Now it's 3 p.m. It's raining
3
here.
p.m.
It's like we have
Oh,
some cold, very cold today. But it's okay.
nice. Yeah, here weather is perfect. A little bit hot. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Is Gabriel connected?
Yeah, no, it's not. He's not in the stream yet. So I'm
Mm,
gonna. I do wanna say the welcome. So I add him to the stream.
wait a second. Wait a second.
Okay.
Right. So yeah, just like I can't believe we're live. So let me check it with my phone.
I know we are. We have 18 waiting live viewers right now. I
Oh,
think
okay.
if the counter is correct.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Oh,
Perfect.
that's fantastic. Yeah, that's perfect. Eduardo is saying nice things about our facial hair.
Oh, Eduardo, you would have
Okay.
this when you get a little older. You would have this.
Okay, so it's time to
Right.
let's start this.
So thanks for watching us. 18 viewers, whatever viewers we have. We are very excited. So our intro is like welcome to emelletv, where we talk about OCaml, ReScript, and reason ecosystems. And here we often like ask silly questions. We try to bring you great developers and learn from them. And we're gonna have fun with Hanley Miller type systems. Our
That's
intro is
fantastic.
definitely on beta, so it might change, but so far so good, I guess.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Okay, so let's welcome Gabriel. I'm gonna add him to the stream now. Welcome, Gabriel.
Hello.
Hello there.
How are you?
Hey man, how are you doing?
Pretty good. Pretty good. It's finally a bit
Nice.
not as hot here anymore, so I'm pretty happy.
Not bad. Right. Nice slide. Nice slide,
yeah?
Gabriel.
Yes,
Yeah.
he has the best light, the best lighting
Yeah.
of us all.
Takes a lot of setup, but yeah.
Okay. So yeah, Gabriel. First, like, imagine that someone who is listening to you doesn't know you at all. So you can do like a fast intro, where you're from, where you work, and what are your motivations. That would be
Yeah,
perfect to
sure.
start.
Yeah, so my name is Gabriel. I'm from Sweden. I currently live in Stockholm, Sweden, so the capital or just outside, with my girlfriend and my son, who's 2.5 years old. Originally, I'm a behavioral scientist, so I studied a lot of like psychology at the university, and then I kind of, as many others do, fell into programming instead of just doing what I was trained for. I've been doing like primarily front-end development, but I've been like moving around a lot, as you do, kind of through the whole stack. But I'm mostly like excited about just the front-end parts. Databases are fun as well. Like, no offense, but the front-end part is more fun for me. I've also been interested in and involved in the ReScript and the recent OCaml community for a while now. I don't know for how long, but I'm starting to feel seasoned. So for a little while, at least.
Okay.
And then
When did you join? When did you join? Do you remember what version or what happened?
Yeah, it was maybe Bucklescript 4,
right
around there, I think. Yeah, I remember the upgrade to 5. Wasn't it, or a while before records were objects, at least in the representation.
Right.
I think I started tinkering with Reason a while before that, but then as many like, I guess I come primarily from JavaScript and TypeScript, as many others do as well, and I had
right. So
way
before hooks, right? Way before
before hooks, yeah, like just maybe 6 months or a year before moving from the record-based APIs to the hook APIs, I would say.
Right.
Probably.
Right.
So around there.
Yeah. Good. Sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
Oh no, I don't remember where I were, so that was probably a good.
You were saying that you were part of the Reason ecosystem for quite a long, and I believe you would continue saying something like Relay or something on GraphQL. So
yeah, before that, like, so my background is I started with PHP and WordPress and a lot of those things, and then I transitioned into yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, here we don't mention PHP.
Okay, yeah. Well, so I started with a forbidden language back in I can't remember when, but like a while back.
Right.
And then I transitioned into JavaScript, and I started with Flow actually for the type system, and then got forced into TypeScript after it basically took over. But I remember when I first saw JavaScript like outside of just jQuery. I think at that point it was like Backbone and Marionette and those things. I hated it. I like, why would you want to do anything like you have PHP? You can just reload the page, and you have query parameters and whatnot. Like, why would you ever want to have need to have anything on the client? And then that changed pretty quickly after that, and I started loving JavaScript instead. And at that point, I was working at a web agency, and so we did lots of projects for various customers of different sizes, and we needed to pick a front-end framework basically to get productive or more productive. Basically, whatever was needed after the jQuery stage, which it covers a lot of ground, but still, like, you need something for the more advanced parts. And we started with Angular. We looked at React at that point. It was one of the absolute first like React versions. I can't remember what it was called, but way back, the create class APIs and whatnot. Looked at that and thought like, oh no, not gonna use that. And then started using Angular. And then it took a month or so, and we maybe we'll try React. Like we'll see how it goes. And then we were kind of hooked on that, so we continued on the React route instead of the Angular route. Yeah, right. And then I fell into a lot of GraphQL and Relay and whatnot as well, of course.
Right. Perfect. So aside from Reason or ReScript, which other like alternative language for the front end are you interested, or did you felt like that was a good fit or something that you would be comfortable using?
I haven't really used another alt language for anything in production, but I've been pretty interested in and curious about like ClojureScript and ClojureScript, those things has been quite interesting to me. I've also had a look at like Elm and those and that type of thing, but it hasn't really felt like my thing. So I guess like Reason was the first like real alt language that I put in production,
right?
Like used for anything more serious.
Right.
Yeah, that is like fantastic because like it's like my experience is like the same. Like I played with some but it was just toy projects. But ReScript and Reason were the first one I actually had the guts to go to my team. Hey, let's put this in production, even though it was like breaking changes all the time, but it felt like it was the right choice.
Right. So yeah, first question, mandatory. What's the biggest feature for Reason for you? Like, what's the thing that you can't live without it?
It's, I guess, like it's the type system overall, I'd say, and like ergonomics of it is like the thing that has drew me most to this. There's just like Reason or ReScript is basically what I want, like what I wanted like Flow to be, or what I wanted TypeScript to eventually become, or so it's all about like the productivity for me. So I'm much more productive even though I've been using TypeScript and JavaScript for much longer than ReScript or Reason. I'm just much more productive in ReScript, and I think it's about the type system, because I also like type systems and I prefer like the kind of static strict things. But it's also about the ergonomics, like the syntax and everything around, like not having to annotate but still having a fully sound program. Those things like are what keeps me around.
Right. What's the feature on the opposite? What's the feature that you cannot understand? Not understand, maybe not the word, but just like you cannot handle from the compiler, basically.
Well, one thing is we need a much better way of handling like dynamic imports. So pointing to the actual source location of modules and things like that. That's a thing. Some form of solution for async await would be also something that like I don't do. Since I do front end mainly with ReScript, and I'm also working almost exclusively with Relay and recent versions of Relay, and that uses like suspense and so like I don't feel the pain of not having async await as much as I know other people are, because I don't like I very rarely, like the few times I actually handle promises myself is mostly just one level, one promise, one call, basically. So I'm not hurting that much from it, but I know others are, and I know that's something that'll need to be solved for things to be attractive for a lot of developers, and also for backend work, where you have a lot of like communications with external stuff. That's the thing that I feel is something that really needs to be solved.
Right. Let's start with the drama.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with the drama. What's your opinion about the famous rename of Backstreet to ReScript?
I think it's
people
like
call it a split. People call it a split.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just say it, a rename, a new syntax, and that's it. But you gave me your point of view.
Yeah. For me personally, it's more or less almost only positive, since I'm so invested in the JS space, and the split, or whatever you want to call it, has been a way of refocusing and only focusing on the JS part, which has like gained me a lot. And I really felt that getting a single focus has made like the ReScript team output a lot of really nice stuff in a fairly short period of time, and with a lot of energy and enthusiasm. But at the same point, I'm, of course, like, I understand the other camp as well, who saw their dreams crushed with like combining the native and JavaScript story in a more like sensible way.
Totally.
I guess so. I'm always like this ends up happening in a lot of small communities, and I'm always sad when it happens, because there's so many brilliant people around here, and I just wish people could like work together and have one vision. But of course that's not possible,
right?
Because that wouldn't be fun either if everyone had the same vision. But like,
if
one could dream, then
exactly. Right. So you mentioned small communities. That kind of like resembles, when I think about you, that you are part as well of the Relay community. And Relay, I wouldn't say it is small, because there's like a lot of people really passionate about and really working through it, but it's way smaller than the GraphQL kind of like monster. The question here is like, why do you like those small communities? Like, why are they attracting to you?
So, like, a bit of backstory here is that 10 years ago, I started getting heavily involved in music production. As you can see the guitars and stuff. I've always been playing guitar and been very interested in producing music as well. And at that point, I started like recording, so the guitar, but also like doing MIDI stuff and synthesizers and whatnot. And I did that exclusively with open source software and Linux, and that's also an incredibly small community of like a lot of very brilliant people who have a pretty hard time getting along and like seeing each other's ideas and whatnot. So I think I'm drawn to these small like communities because they usually attract a lot of very smart people. And so you can learn a ton from people in these communities, and people are also like usually in the small communities, the ones who are there are like the enthusiasts, who are usually very keen on like sharing knowledge and inviting you to join and do stuff. And that's the part I like about software development. I want to like build things like together with other people and try and solve like real issues, and then preferably like work on, of course, like quite challenging problems, but also like maybe like solving real world problems. And I think like in small communities, you get so much closer to the source, to the like metal of it, to the actual like you can. So like in the recent community and also in the Relay community, like it's small enough that you can actually get an actual personal relationship with a lot of the people who maybe build the libraries you use or maintain the libraries you use or the technologies you use. And that's something that I value very highly, just because I'm an enthusiast at heart. Like I love just doing stuff and being excited about things and trying to push things forward and helping others and getting helped by others and whatnot. So I love this like small community building thing, and that's just much more accessible in small communities. I'd say.
That's true. But do you actually like miss the opposite of like a huge community like JavaScript? Like it's moving too fast, like too fast in a volume that it's impossible to handle. Do you miss this kind of like magnitude of energy, or not really?
No, I don't know. Like
I'm more thinking like sometimes I have feeling like the camel community is like just steady but slow, but in a very good progress. I saw ReScript doing kind of the same energy, where like some spikes of energy, some like many projects came out, people put it in production, like I don't know, the editor, or I don't know, any library that pops up, but then things get a bit slower, and everything's a little bit quiet then. And I think that kind of like JavaScript never sleeps. Like it's all the time. Like if you open Twitter, you can, I don't know, doom scroll like the entire Twitter, and there's gonna be like 10 topics or even 100 topics. Yeah.
Like I think that's also fun. That's also like a lot of it's another type of like building stuff for that type of community is so different, because you immediately have so many more eyes on things, and so many more people who can potentially like try your stuff and find bugs and whatnot. And that's also fun, of course, but it's harder to get to the kind of day-to-day life I want to be in, where I can have like a lot of have a lot of like contact with people and who build stuff the way I build stuff, kind of fun.
Right.
I think it can also be a bit fatiguing, of course, but I don't really mind that. I think it's nice that things are happening, and there's so much happening in every single corner that you of course feel like if you go on vacation for 6 months and you come back, you're like outdated.
Right. Right. Definitely. So let's I have a lot of questions about Relay, because what like I did play with it, and I think the other Gabriel as well, but you are always like really pushing for Relay. You even have like the VS Code plugin, you have the PPX, so you are heavily invested like a lot of time. So I think many people want to try, but I don't think it's as accessible as GraphQL. So
of course.
Just what's the marketing speech? Like, what's the actual like landing page sentence that should convert me into remove the endpoint from GraphQL and do the entire server in Relay?
If I'd have that, like there'd be many more Relay users.
Right.
If I could actually like formulate why it's but
like, it's a marketing copy. It's a marketing problem then.
Yeah. It's in a lot of sense, it's actually it's a marketing. It's a marketing and community size problem in a lot of senses. But so like Relay for me, there's two things that has been like really like, wow, this thing I never want to leave, and it's been ReScript. That's one. Just clicks for me, just makes sense for me. Sure, there are lots of warts, there are lots of things that needs to improve, there are a ton of things to do, the community is small, blah blah blah, there's like a ton of issues, of course, but the actual like development style and what it gives me, and also like reason for native stuff and OCaml, it's just exactly what I want in terms of that. Fits me really well, and it also like, it's not for me, I'm very much about like, I want to be productive. I like now with a family and whatnot, I have so little time to actually sit down and do stuff that I just want to get stuff done, and whatever's going to help me get stuff done and get it done in a like healthy and scalable and sensible way is something I'm going to like, probably. So ReScript is one thing that just I banged my head against the wall for like 3 months, that like the same way that I think a lot of like JS and TypeScript developers do when they start with ReScript. But after that, it was a really like epiphany experience with like, okay, this makes sense. Like this is much better for me personally than an alternative. And then Relay is the same thing for me. It also just clicks for me, and I've been using it since more or less since it was released, and I've never looked back, because it's very similar to ReScript and Reason in a way, because it has a lot of like rules, and it pushes you in directions that you might not always like, but that will ensure that you build something that's like scalable and healthy.
Right.
So the actual like the marketing pitch is that it's almost like I like when using other GraphQL frameworks, I often feel like things end up being a more like they worry, like, or not they, but like people worry so much about like the actual transportation of data. Like we worry so much about, okay, GraphQL is great for you can detail a query, like you can fetch only what you need, and you have like a visual, an empty JSON object, and you can inspect it. And then there's so much like effort going from the server to the client. And then coming to the client, it's like, okay, maybe we have a normalized cache, but then it's like, whoop, that's all. Like, here you have your data, do what you want with your data. You can pass it along, you can do whatever you want. Like, but there's so much effort going on, like from server to client. And Relay is much, much, much more about the client itself, the application. Like Relay promotes obviously co-locating like data requirements with your components. So when you build components in Relay, you have your props as you do in React, of course, but you also have your props in GraphQL, so to speak. So you define a component and ensure that always like receives the right data it needs to render, and then that data is like isolated. That component is isolated because Relay hides this from everything around it. So if you have an avatar component, for instance, I always have this lame example, but I'm going to use it anyway. An avatar component, and you want to add an alt tag to that. Like currently, you're requesting the avatar URL for the current user or the user you want to show the avatar for, and then you want to add an alt tag with the name of the user or whatever. In Relay, you just add that data requirement to the avatar fragment, and then Relay would make sure that data is included in every single query that's around, and also propagated to your view. And you can of course do that in other frameworks as well, but Relay makes the fragment part much more automatic. But it's even more interesting if you think like I need to add a pop-up to my avatar. You can click the avatar and get a little like info window, and that info window can display maybe your 5 best friends or something like that. But I also need those 5, like how many friends you show initially. That needs to be configurable per like place you use it. So you need to be able to tell Relay that, okay, when I use this in the main navigation bar, I want this to show the 5 first friends. And then when I use this in a like details list of a bunch of users, I want it to show only 3 friends. And Relay also makes this incredibly easy. You can even add it with like pagination and whatnot, and Relay will just take care of plumbing everything together for you. So the people who render, like, or the components that render the avatar component itself, they know nothing about whatever that is doing. It just knows that, okay, I need this avatar component needs data from the user. Whatever that data is, I don't know. I'm just passing along this black box to it, and it's going to take care of that. Which means that it's really easy and it's really not error prone to kind of scale, refactor, and change things as you go along, because everything is kind of small boxes that's hidden from each other, basically. So it's
would you say, just a metaphor, would you say that these containers are similar to what we use to the Wallet Redux or a mini application, something like that? Or what's the concept of black box for here?
Think of it as, it's quite similar to a selector in Redux, I guess, where you quite similar and then not similar in another sense, but also like, you can imagine it that way. Like, so the component, the only thing someone outside of the component knows about the component is that I need data from this GraphQL type or these GraphQL types.
Right.
What that data is just hidden for it.
Right.
And that means that you can like, you never have to worry about, you don't have to know anything about the application around you. You just need to know what you're set out to do. So it's kind of the same, it's the same thought that React and component-based development has for the UI, like isolate things and make them take only like well-defined props, and then just whatever that component is doing, we don't care. We just want to render a user list. We just want to render an avatar, whatever. It needs these props. It's that thing taken into the data layer and into GraphQL. Like GraphQL is almost even an implementation detail here. Like there's a good quote from another person in the Relay community that like I would I'm using Relay or GraphQL to be able to use Relay, not the other way around. I'm not using GraphQL to kind of for itself. It's more about
That's
the development
fantastic.
model of Relay itself, kind of. So it's just it solves most of the UI development issues for me and allows me to be productive and fast in building stuff, but also like having things work over time and never being afraid, like with ReScript, like never being afraid of refactoring something, because I know that Relay kind of has my back in the same sense that ReScript has. I can change stuff and do whatever I want, and then somebody's going to tell me that I've done things wrong or things are missing or whatever.
Okay, love it. Yeah, I would say that for me, Relay looks like the fragments are what you want fragments to be in GraphQL, for sure. But always like when I see those definitions, I almost like remind me like how many code bases have Apollo installed, right? And then seems like I hear so many stories about Apollo pain that when I hear like about like, oh, Relay solves that, like solves all of this for you, and you are, I don't know, fighting again optimism, like some optimistic response that needs to happen but doesn't happen, but doesn't the cache, but like this kind of like massive not your problems kind of things that doesn't get you productive. Kind of like get jealous for sure.
It's good to like remember that, or this is something that struck me a lot of times, especially when I also run like another meetup for Relay itself, and the Relay core team has been on there quite a few times, and it's always so inspiring to talk to them. And those discussions have really made me realize that, remember that like GraphQL is from Facebook and Relay is from Facebook, and when they open sourced GraphQL and Relay, they thought that Relay was going to be the thing that took off. That people weren't going to care about GraphQL, kind of. That's just an implementation data, whatever. This is the cool thing. And instead, like the total opposite happened. Nobody cared about Relay whatsoever. Everyone cared about GraphQL stuff. So there's a lot of things in how Relay does things that's very interesting. Even if you're not going to use it, it's interesting from a GraphQL expert perspective. And the fragments are really at the heart of everything. And the fragments are so interesting in terms of Relay, because not only are they a good fit in GraphQL itself, like the language, they're also an excellent fit in UI development because they provide split points for your applications. So you have a query that's composed of.
What do you mean with the split points?
Sorry.
If
I can explain this, I'm not.
Sorry,
like,
sorry,
we'll
teacher. I just raised my hand too early.
So it's about like a query in Relay is, instead of like, imagine a regular GraphQL query, you have your definition, your query definition, that's great, and then you get a blob of JSON, and that's it. You have your response, excellent, you pass it down your UI, and that's it. That works fine. In Relay, a query is, you also get the JSON blob, but it goes into Relay, and then Relay gives the data out to all of the components that ask for it through the fragment definition. So you can think of a query in Relay not as just a query of GraphQL in it, but a query of a bunch of fragments. Fragments that use fragments that use fragments that use fragments. It's like there's fragments everywhere. And every single fragment is its own subscription to data from the store. So this kind of solves the same way that Recoil solves update performance by only subscribing to exactly the data that changes. Relay does the same thing. It only subscribes to data that changes from the actual fragment. So whenever you have a performance issue in Relay, so imagine, for example, you have a feed and you have a like button, and clicking this like button needs to change that you've liked this post or whatever it is. And that needs to propagate through the UI in a solution where you have a JSON blob coming from the server, and then that gets passed into the client. You have to re-render the full client, because that's where data comes from. But in Relay, you'd have a fragment for that, and only that fragment would re-render, which means that only that small part of the UI would re-render. And that's something that's like, you have performance by default, and you also have the strong conventions from Relay, which means that you're continuously like pushed into thinking this way, thinking in a way that makes whatever you're building have a really solid chance of being performant kind of by default, so to speak. So imagine the small fragments, they're like, they're their own little thing. And when I say split points, let's see if I can explain this. Both like Relay and React has a lot of like new cool features, and GraphQL as well. Like there's for instance, a defer directive in GraphQL now that's almost, I'm not sure it's merged into the spec yet, but it's very close, which basically means that you can turn your response into multipart and say that in this query, this fragment, I'm fine if that's delivered whenever it's ready, but deliver everything else before. So instead of doing like you normally do, like you have a, back to the avatar example, you want to load the friends list, or you have a friends list, you want to load the list asynchronously or debounce or whatever you want to call it. In a normal, in another like solution, you'd probably have one query that you make and then get down to the rendering the user list, and you'd make a new query for the user list. But with defer, you can bring everything into the same query and just mark that user list as, okay, I'm fine with this being delivered whenever you want. And the server takes care of that and does that in the same response. So you don't need to do a new query yourself, and that helps with a ton of things. Like it helps with performance, and it also helps with not accidentally falling into the kind of waterfall thing where you have a ton of things that you render, but that needs to fetch data and fetch component data and code, and then render to figure out that I now need to make another query for the next data. So it kind of protects for that. But these fragments, they are like natural split points for defer, which means that it's incredibly easy in Relay to build a UI that revolves around that. So with suspense, because in Relay, it's also like all suspense, which means that if the data is not there, that fragment component is going to suspend, and you can handle the suspension however you want in your application. Do you want to let that bubble up and suspend the entire application and show it loading, or just this small part? And I've actually I have a project I'm building right now where we have a lot of like external API connections that are slow, and they're slow in different like some of them are really slow and others are just quite slow, and having defer makes it so much easier to, like, I don't have to spend almost any thought on this. I just need to defer it, make sure I catch the suspense, and then it's like done. I don't have to do any plumbing. I don't have to coordinate fetching new queries and whatnot. So I have another thing around that as well, but I'm maybe let this.
Okay, let me ask you a question first. Like, do you have strategies to, because you mentioned that you can action like just mutate. I'm gonna use the word mutate, but you can mutate the fragment, and the fragment gets updated on the backend and goes back to the view. What are the, and you mentioned the defer. What are the other strategies to? You can do pooling. Can you do sockets as well? Like, what are the different strategies to tell the client, hey, there's new data, or how is that implemented?
Yeah, you can do basically like so comparing, for instance, Relay to Apollo in just how kind of, this is also the big like marketing pain that Apollo is incredibly easy to get going with. Apollo has this link concept, which is basically a one-liner for setting up all of your communication with your server, and that's what it promotes, and that makes it extremely easy to get going. Relay has nothing like that. Relay is like, okay, here's you get to implement your own network layer, do your own fetch, handle your own everything around that, and that's a pain starting out. But as soon as you hit something that's even remotely kind of advanced, you suddenly have control over everything. Like, okay, it's a pain to set up, but you get to like reach into the core of it all, which makes it much easier to implement special stuff for yourself that somebody hasn't done through a link or whatever. So like you're free to communicate however you want with the server as in terms of GraphQL. But for like strategies that you were mentioning, you can of course poll queries and trust the normalized cache to update anything in the UI that's gotten updated, that works automatically. You can also use subscriptions. It's particularly interesting in Relay, I think, just because of the fragment model, where you can subscribe to something and just have trust your server to send you updates for whatever it is, and trust Relay to just propagate these updates out through UI in an as efficient way as possible because of the subscription model in Fragments, like only the it's the updated data is only going to reach whatever component is actually using it. So that would be so you can do basically, I guess what I want to say is you can do what you want in that sense. It has very little.
I think this is where like ReScript and Relay are really much alike. They are very hard to get started at first, but once your application starts scaling and you grown up, you have some real world problems. You see, oh, this is why things are made this way. I can replace this part. I can make this part optimized, right? So it's like ReScript and Relay are really like a butter and bread. It's very fantastic, like how they compare to each other this way.
That's amazing.
It's a very similar thought. It's a very similar like value proposition, so to speak. Like if you pick them, if you like both with ReScript and with Relay, if you pick them, you're picking something. You're not picking something to just get started as quickly as possible, and whatever. You're picking something that you want to be able to scale and maintain over a long time.
Right.
And
I see both values. I see those both technologies having the same kind of like values for sure.
They both have better lower level APIs, like without limiting your expressiveness. Apollo, on the other hand, without you trying to bash on Apollo, but it gives you too much freedom or too much easiness to get started with, and then when you want to go out of the path they put for you, then you start having a problem because you don't have control over your tooling range.
Right. So you would say the just to do like another metaphor, maybe it's wrong again, but just like Apollo would be the ruined Rails, right? Like if you go this path, you're gonna be happy, you can do stuff, and the opposite would be Symfony. Just like something that you need to handle yourself, but when you have it, you can scale it properly. Just to not bash PHP.
But I think a big difference is also that, also again, like that really is really similar to ReScript. Is Relay promotes static definitions of things and doesn't want to do. It wants to do as little work as possible at runtime. So everything in you can't do dynamic queries in Relay, where dynamic means that you construct the query on the fly. Just as in ReScript, like it's way harder to do dynamic stuff like slicing through objects and walking through keys and whatever other madness things to do, like you can do in JavaScript. So it's Relay also has a compiler that does a bunch of magic with GraphQL. That's eventually the result of everything you piece together in your UI. So it's a lot of focus is on that. Whereas, for instance, Apollo has virtually nothing of that. There's a few things that you like, and that's also good in a sense. Like not everyone needs Relay. Like not everyone needs static things. But Apollo does a lot of things at runtime, and also doesn't know enough about your or can't know enough about your schema. So you need to. There's a few scripts that you need to run to be able to use unions and the interfaces in the full way and whatnot.
Right.
So it's just a philosophical difference.
How good is the code generation?
Sorry.
How good is the code generation? So based on a schema, do you have like a lot of like backend and frontend kind of like the client types? Maybe you can generate the types. Well, I've used to get that in GraphQL with Nexus, and definitely have types with GraphQL PPX. So how are those in Relay?
I would say it's very similar to both the GraphQL code generator that's around for Apollo and whatnot, where you point the generator to your project and it generates types for your queries and whatnot. So Relay generates types for everything you use through GraphQL. So for mutations and for subscriptions and for queries and fragments, obviously. So it's very similar to GraphQL PPX as well in that sense.
Right.
that it's generating for everything basically. There's not anything for like, here I want to generate records for all of the types in my GraphQL schema, for example. That's kind of out of the scope for Relay, so to speak. It only cares about the view and the actual like UI. But yeah, but the code generation capabilities are pretty nice. There's a they've been traditionally in Relay, they've been maintained by the core team for Flow in JavaScript, and the community has maintained TypeScript version of it as well. And I then maintain a Reason or ReScript version of it too.
Sweet.
So it's
nice. So what are the things that you have made as an engineer? Maybe it's not code related, maybe it's not reason related, and that you are more proud of? What the thing that you go to your mom and say, "Hey, mom, I did this," even though your mom might not understand at all?
She just nods and looks happy. Whatever I tell her, she's like, "Oh, as long as you're happy, that's good." But like, so I'm a Swede, so it's hard to be. We're not allowed to be proud of things. So, but I would say that I do. I really enjoy the everything around ReScript Relay and combining ReScript and Relay for a ton of reasons. I think what has held me in the ReScript community overall is that when I started out with Reason back in the day, I like felt like I saw that, okay, the capabilities that this programming language has allows me to kind of plug the holes in Relay that I've been kind of annoyed with in TypeScript or in Flow.
Right.
And that set me out on a way too long mission of trying to get this working together. Right. But now that I'm so incredibly invested in this and deep into it, and I've actually started building a lot of real world stuff and products and whatnot with it, it's incredibly rewarding to kind of, let's say, own the whole stack. But I don't own the whole stack since I don't own either ReScript or Relay, but like the development experience around using them together. That is incredibly rewarding and fun. And I'm also, let's say I'm happy with.
Okay, yeah, don't say proud.
Not proud,
right.
Not proud.
But are you? So would you say?
Else, but I'm happy about.
Right. So would you say that? How can you try to describe the feeling? And I'm getting very deep. Can you try to describe the feeling when you create a library or even like a editor plugin, and then you use it in your, like in a client job or in like a pet project or even a production one? Can you try to describe that sensation or feeling?
Yeah, it's really for me and with ReScript Relay and everything around that, it's really the classical kind of like scratching your own itch, where usually like when I work with other technologies and whatnot, and whether it's when I work for clients or myself, it's always like you hit some block in productivity and you can't really do much about it. It's more like, yeah, maybe somebody will eventually look at a ticket somewhere around here about this, or, oh, it would be nice to be able to do this in the editor. That would save a lot of time, and then it's impossible to kind of get anywhere with it, or you don't have time or whatever. And with the setup I have now, where I just for background, and I have the ReScript Relay project is for using ReScript and Relay together, but I also have a VS Code extension that tries to simplify as much as possible of like the friction that you feel when using Relay. And there's a lot of like typing and things like that. And I also now, since a few days, I also have a CLI where I can do a bit of other stuff as well. But it's really like you build something and you're very like critical of yourself and the way things work, and then you find something that's like, oh, this sucks, I don't want to do it like this, or this is a lot of friction. Why do I have to create new files myself and move, like copy paste the data from into a new fragment, and I have to remember what, like keep the both editor windows open and remember what type this was on. I got to hover here and have a look, and what I can just build something that can extract that for me into a file, for
Right.
instance. That's very rewarding. I'm happy about that. It's nice.
Right. Yeah, definitely the dog fooding. Dog fooding. Yeah, it's very very
it's
cool.
fantastic.
So it's like,
the-
I guess the feeling is feeling that you're hitting some form of roadblock, but then also feeling empowered that, okay, I can actually try and do something about this. And then you do something about it, and most often it works, and then occasionally it doesn't work. But like whenever it does work, you get a pretty intense like feeling of pleasure, since you're able to resolve your issue, and you can you can see as soon as you hit the roadblock, you can see that, okay, I can do something about this, and it's all in my hands. Like I'm not blocked by anything. It's just a matter of how much time and effort I can put into this.
Right. That's cool.
Yes, that's very fantastic. Yeah, I'm a pretty heavy user of ReScript Relay here in my company, and I can say it's really good. I used Relay in the past with JavaScript or TypeScript, and all the pains I had when I was using their fragments with TypeScript or JavaScript, all those like mistakes you could do there, it's like impossible to do in ReScript with ReScript Relay. So the productivity is really high, and my team also agrees with this. Like it's something we would never open. Like we're not gonna use the ReScript Relay
Right.
anymore. If everyone would not do that at all, it's very good, man. Like the tooling you made, it's pretty fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Here we have a little bit of proud. So another question that might sound a little bit dramatic, or so Flow is focusing on internal usage.
Yeah.
Which means that we can always like have a 2-hour discussion about how Facebook manages their open source or their technical decisions. That's not that kind of drama we like. But the question would be like, how do you see those projects? Because Relay, I don't know how the governance works in Relay, but do you fear that for Relay? Do you think that it would affect Relay at some point, or that has nothing to do?
How Facebook manages projects, or how the Flow has changing directions? Right.
Flow has like changed the direction, which kind of like felt like, okay, TypeScript is gonna eat the world. I'm just afraid that, or I might be afraid of like, okay, Facebook can do the same with Relay.
So starting with Flow itself, since I've been a heavy user of Flow since forever, basically, this is just a formalization of what has been true for the last like 3 or 4 years. Like it's Flow has been dead like there's a lot of big code bases stuck on it, but Flow has been dead in the race with TypeScript for so incredibly long. So I think Flow is a really cool piece of software written in OCaml, so it's really nice. But this is like nothing new, and Flow, like the thing with Flow, it's not going to affect React or Relay in any way, because it's all in like, okay, like the experience of using Flow is very similar to the experience of using TypeScript. The big difference is the size of the community, and with the size of the community, the amount of bindings around and things like that, or type definitions, it's called in the TypeScript world. But like developing with Flow is very similar to, like, they have a great LSP and editor integration and whatnot. It's not at all like being dropped in another universe. So for contributors to Relay and to React, it's not going to be different. They're going to remain on Flow. And for the outside usage, the important thing is the TypeScript definitions anyway, and those are going to be intact the same way. It's the same with Relay. It's Flow internally, but now it's even gone in an even better direction for Relay, because now with the new Relay compiler, they've redone the Relay compiler from JS to Rust for speed and scale, and that has native support for TypeScript instead, which means that the core team is kind of forced to care about TypeScript. Not that they don't want to care about TypeScript, but if there's time limitations. So that's actually really good. And as for like the governance of projects and Relay, like Relay is I think like Relay it's somewhere in between of React and Flow, as in, I mean, Relay is not going anywhere, like or like not going away in any way, sense, or form, because they're using Relay almost exclusively, I think, for the entire new Facebook.com. So they're incredibly invested in Relay, and are going to continue investing in Relay. I have no fear whatsoever around that.
Right.
And also got to remember that Relay is no product or library is ever finished, but Relay has been incredibly stable for very long. And in the same sense that React is also very stable, and that they also guinea pig things in the enormous like Facebook user base for a long time before releasing it to the public. It's the same with Relay. Like when stuff reaches the Relay public open source API, it's been in use at Facebook.com for a long time,
Okay.
and really like bell tested. So, but with that said, like there's no big campaign for trying to make the industry use Relay instead of the alternatives. Like the Relay team is my impression is that they're not going to spend time on that. The little time they spend they are going to spend on the open source parts and whatever the big users of Relay needs and whatnot.
Right.
So I'm not worried about that. It's like I would be worried if it were a half finished product with a lot of promise, but here it virtually has everything that's needed already. There's of course always like a ton of improvements that you can do and whatnot, but it's pretty not feature complete, but it's pretty it's very mature and very stable.
Right. Cool. Yeah, I can see like the whole picture for sure. Cool. So shall we make the chat do some questions? We don't want to get, I don't know, any idea, any question. We mentioned Relay more than
yeah.
than possible, but yeah, we're totally fine with that.
Yeah, I think let's say if anyone asks something. In the meanwhile, I have some questions. Like, why do you think his script is so weak on the back end? Like to compile to Node, like looks like our greatest face is only front end for some years already. So what's missing to go there?
I'm not sure. I just haven't had an opportunity to try it like fully on the back end. Most of the backend work I do nowadays is building GraphQL servers, and there's of course alternatives for building GraphQL servers in pure ReScript or that type of thing, but I really want to stay as close to GraphQL JS as possible, just because it's a spec compliant implementation and there's so much tooling and whatnot around it. If I feel like I want to experiment on the front end with ReScript and Relay and whatnot, I want to like experiment very little on the back end. Like I just want to get stuff done there and have the support of the larger community. So if there would be a way to use like a ReScript kind of like GQTX or Nexus or whatever, that type of solution that kind of compiles down to or translates down to GraphQL JS, I would for sure use that instead, because I can really, when I work with TypeScript, like I do like most of my work with TypeScript at my full-time day job, and then also like for backends and whatnot. There's a lot of things that ReScript solves that is also really potent for backend work. So I would like to do it, but it's just not. Yeah, the GraphQL part especially is not there for me right now.
Yeah, it makes sense. It looks like most of the tooling is being done by front-enders, two front-enders, right? I have the question from Eduardo, and he's asking if you are working full-time on his script right now.
Yeah.
I think you just said, right?
Yeah, so I work at a consultancy called Arison, and my day job, so to speak, is working with clients, and currently I'm mostly doing work with TypeScript, or almost exclusively, at least not ReScript as well, for client work. But we're also we're part of a startup incubator, so we're also building new products and whatnot. And currently most of the new products are built in ReScript and ReScript Relay and whatnot. So I would say that I'm not full-time, but maybe 50% in ReScript.
Right.
And that's the part I enjoy most. So
right. So two questions here. One is that, did you have a chance to convince a client to use ReScript? Did you have this experience?
I haven't been like the work we do mostly at Ericsson is where you go out and you're basically like you're employed, you're a consultant, and you're working in a team in an already established product. So
Right.
most of the time you come in and you start working as in a team, and there's already a stack in place and the product in place and whatnot. But if we take the startup part, that's much more free, and that's where we kind of control all of the product and technology stuff. And there I've been, of course, have to convince my other partners and whatnot about why use ReScript, especially in terms of hiring and whatnot. Why use ReScript instead of TypeScript, for instance. So kind of yes, but not for a full scale like somebody else pays for everything project.
Right. All right. And the second question is like, did you heard about Melange? What's your opinion? Do you see it as a safe bet? Do you see us too early? Yeah.
I don't know. Like I've been obviously following Melange as well, and since the famous split. But I've been like I'm not sure. It's like Melange is obviously focusing more on the camel parts, and that's never been where I've been comfortable, so to speak. I'm from the JS part, so for me, like using Dune instead of the kind of JS tooling is maybe something that I could do or get behind, but it's not natural to me in the sense that it would be natural to someone who's more involved in the OCaml parts of the community. But I mean, I'm always a huge fan of anything that Antonio does, and so it's I'm following it with interest, of course, but it's not. I'm not the target group for Melange, I would say. If you compare Melange and ReScript, I'm more the target group for ReScript, since I'm almost exclusively doing JavaScript heavy things, so to speak.
Right. Perfect. Yeah. Is there an implementation or with Relay on OCaml?
No, I don't think so. It's all JS. But I mean, there's in and around the Relay community, there's been always been a kind of feeling that somebody should do the good parts about Relay in other languages. There's actually a port of Relay to Swift that's really awesome.
Right.
That someone has done. But that's porting everything, so porting the store and everything. But no, I'm not aware of anything similar to Relay in OCaml.
Right. It might be very hard with like the connections that they've got. So yeah.
It's more it's a lot of work, I would say.
Right.
To get there, so it's probably that.
Right. Someone asked, what's up with the heavy weapons on Gabriel's goal? Right. So like. Yeah, what's that?
Yeah, nowadays, like I was mentioning before, I used to do a lot of music production as well. I've actually released, I think, 3 full-length albums, or released, put out on the internet.
Right.
But nowadays,
links down below. Links down below. Like we're gonna share the album.
We need the link, man, right now.
Okay. Yes. Yes, I will. Yeah, isn't it? But nowadays, like I don't really do much of that. So these are mostly here because they take up less room here. But also my girlfriend is she's doing her PhD, and so she does a lot of teaching, and it always like confuses the students that she has a bunch of guitars now that during Corona. So she always gets questioned about that. So I'm keeping up to try and continuously annoy her, so to speak.
Not bad. So yeah, we don't want to take much of your time, Gabriel. If you have any question or anything to want to say, it's definitely your time. So
No, thank you for doing this, and thank you for inviting me. It's really nice that you. I like this format, and I think this is going to be a great series. And then I want to do a shout out to Brazil and the community there, both around ReScript, but also obviously I have Relay. I'm following that closely through Sebelius and whatnot, and Brazil seems awesome for being so many enthusiastic and cool people. So big shout out to Brazil.
Right, definitely cool Brazil.
Yeah.
Oh, that was fantastic, man. Like we were very happy to bring you in. Like it was the first person in our minds. Like this was pretty good. Like and that's it, right? Do you have anything else to say, Dave?
No, I think that's it. I hope everybody loved our questions.
Yeah,
if you want to propose someone to appear here, let us know. We have like a long list of invites, but always happy to be open. So hope to see you next time. And let's see if it's next Wednesday, next Wednesday. We don't know the schedule yet. We are definitely we're just getting set up, but we're gonna invite Gabriel soon again for sure.
All right. Thank you everyone for joining us. See you until we have the new schedule.
See you guys.
See you. Thanks everyone for joining us. Until the next time.